All right, you guys, welcome back to our round around intersection section. And we just finished up with class assignment 4, doing a round around intersection with the same diameters for the header and branch. So the next switch up from that is going to be to do that with different diameters. And so what we're going to do today, and I'll probably be able to make this video a little bit shorter because there's only just a few things towards the end after we get this thing drawn in and how we develop the branch and especially the header that are different from the last. So I'll probably push pause a few times and set up and draw and then pick it up and explain maybe where things start to change that are new. So I just want to show you what the assignment is. It's what's up on the screen here. We're going to still be working with tubing, some thin wall tubing. So these ODs that I've given you, or the diameters that I've given you, are the OD, which we can use to draw. So eventually we'll go back and work with some pipe schedules again. And probably after we finish this section, we might actually talk about making some of these things out of metal and figuring some stretch outs. So in the meantime, for this assignment, let's just make it out of this OD tubing. So we'll use a header tube diameter of 3.5 inches. That'll be 5 inches in length, which is kind of arbitrary. And the tubing for the branch will be 2 3/4 inch tubing. And we'll make it 3 inches. So it is really quite similar to what we just did. Take a look at it here. When you do dissimilar diameters, these are still concentric, I guess, meaning that this branch is really coming in on center of that header. And when we do this, instead of having those deep V's from that one where this branch being the same diameter of the header, really that material comes all the way down and then terminates at the center point. This one is way shallow of that, I guess. So as this branch comes into that header, it's much more round radius pattern here is one of the things that sets it apart visually. So I just wanted to look at this. Here's our 3.5 inch OD tube for a header. Here's our 2 3/4 inch OD tube for a branch. So I'm going to go over to a draw screen, which I've got the instructions up on there. I like to do that just so I know in case I need to reference or whatever works for you. So there's my information. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this in, and just like I did in the last video, I'll even do all my projection lines, my orientation lines, and I'll probably start back up where maybe I've drawn in the miter that's kind of established as the two views project to each other. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. Let me see. All right. So we're back, and I've just drawn in the dimensions from our instructions and the two views that I need. I've just pulled up some dimensions, so get in the habit of checking, make sure you got your stuff drawn the right dimensions, especially if you're interpreting something from the pipe schedule chart. Make sure you pull those dimensions, make sure you got the correct ODs. This one we're just tubing, so the dimensions shown were the dimensions I used. But I like to pull those up, keep an eye on them, make sure I've got them right. I started this back up where I wanted to show, as I'm pulling these across, my projection lines that will make my orientation line grid here. So I just wanted to kind of go through that in this section here one more time. I'm going to pull them across. So one thing I do, I think we did that in our last video. These ones, when I draw them in, I just pull them an arbitrary length long, and I just pull them down to the center line. And then as I come in here for the right side view, I can kind of define what those are and then show what my miter actually looks like here. So the only thing I've done, I've actually ended up pulling these outside the ODs of that branch. I went ahead and put some orientation lines down to the center line there too. Some drawings you may or may not use those. In this particular drawing I won't, because the outside OD of the tube shown here becomes the center line here in the right side view. So as I bring that orientation line across, that's where I'm going to start. I'll pick it with I'm starting from the outside of this branch of this view and projecting it over, or vice versa. So I'm just going to bring my projection line over from here, and it meets top dead center of the header in the front view. So in that case, that just shows me that the outside OD of this branch, the length is correct. I didn't necessarily need this orientation line down here, but sometimes you will need this. Sometimes you have to pull this branch, or I should say the OD of that branch, a little longer or shorter in this view. So if I take this branch and I throw it off center, that'll become obvious in the next drawing that we do, that sometimes the OD of the branch doesn't necessarily meet top dead center of the header. So just be aware of that. In this view, in the last drawing it did. In this drawing it does. And it picks up both the OD on this side and the OD on that side. So that captures that. I'm going to come down to the next set of lines. Once I've kind of established which ones I'm starting to work with, the next ones I bring over, I just work them from orientation line down till I hit the center points. And so that's what I do here is I pick up the next one. I know that I'm going to be talking about the next line in, and its counterpart over here too. So snap that to that point there. And at this point, this is when it's nice to keep things tidy, is that I can know that I worked with that line by tucking it up to where it kind of terminates. So, and in this case, these ones were kind of unnecessary, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete those. Well, not exactly that much deletion. There we go. I just want to delete these. Yeah, there we go. So, okay, we've established those points. Working with the next line in. I'm going to repeat my line command and grab this next orientation line, project it across to the next set of lines, that one and this one. Great. And go ahead and tuck these up now that I've defined their true lengths. And I've got one last one to work with. The outside, the OD of the branch in this view becomes the center line of the branch in this view, so I seem to be on target for keeping things in the right place. And I'll bring it across till it's perpendicular. And then I can go ahead and tuck this one up. Doesn't need to be any longer than that. I'll leave the yellow line underneath it. That's my center line of branch, so I just have that left in there. Great. So now I've done that. I've used my, and the other side of the pipe is the same. So really all I needed, if I were to project these across, they would pick up the same point. So I'm remembering those defined 2 points in the front view. And all I really need to see is projecting over from these points on the right side view. So once I've got that, I'm just kind of ready to put in what the miter looks like, kind of the weld seam. So I'll just use a solid line. Sorry. And I'll use my red. I'll use a polyline for this. This one will be a little more arc shaped. That last one is pretty, as it comes down to the center line from there and their same diameter, they become a pretty straight V line look. This one might be just a little more arced. Maybe I'll start it here. If I arc and second point, pick it up there and here. And I'll try to pick up another second point. Every time I do that, remember I push S for second point. I'm going to take it to there. So I'm going to repeat that. What I'm saying is every time I tell it that I'm arcing, I have to push S for second point every other point that I push. So got it. So that's my miter. Just ghosted that in. All right. And at this point, we're ready to take the branch information over and develop the branch flat layout pattern. So all that information is contained here in the right side view. So I'll take that over, develop out my branch, working off the circumference of my 2 3/4 inch diameter branch. divide it, use these projection lines to develop that. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll even throw up the flat pattern for my header, which is going to be a 5-inch wide pattern by the circumference of a 3.5-inch tube here. So just remember, when I'm laying out my flat pattern for my branch, it's off one circumference, and then the header will be off a different circumference. So be sure you remember that. And I'll put both of those in, and I'll pick you up when I'm probably going to develop the cutout in the header. I want to show you that. All right. So I went ahead and developed my branch pattern. Yeah. And so, sorry, I was just making sure my video is turned on. I did a little more pausing, and I might mess myself up a little bit. So, anyway, I went ahead and developed my branch pattern. So I went ahead and figured out my circumference, and then I started my pattern at this position, which is just kind of common for me to pick the start of my pattern as my short weld seams. And that's kind of what I think about when I think of this. Even though I may use this as paper and it may not even have a weld seam, I'm still always kind of using those short points as the start of my pattern. This one you can see swoops down a lot more gentle than that last drawing that we did where it was kind of sharp points. So that's just I like that we get to see what these look like, because visually I can tell that that looks like that's going into a smaller diameter. And you kind of build some, you get familiar with what these patterns look like. If I see one with sharp points, I kind of think similar diameter. Anyway, and then you'll see as we push them off center, they become not such a symmetrical piece, kind of. And so it's just interesting to see these. And then I've just made sure, I don't always pull these out to make their own little cut file without all the inner lines in them, which is what I would have to do to change this into a plasma cut file. Maybe I'd want to get rid of any of these lines that the plasma would try to cut. And so I don't require you guys to do that either. I'm not real critical on how you leave some of your drawings, as long as you've got the right circumferences and you've picked the right points and got the pattern looking right. I do like to join it as a polyline, kind of, because I do like to see that that's continuous, that all my points, my outside corners line up. So that is one check that I like to see, is that you've made sure the shape of this thing is all continuous. Anyway, I went ahead and then laid out the header rectangle pattern. So that's just my 3.5-inch OD tube. Figured out the stretched out circumference of it, and got it laid out in there. I like to drop on a center line here, just to break up that pattern a little bit. So, and then as you develop these, you can choose where to start your weld seams too. So, I could put my little weld seams up here on the short. I might just explode this real quick, but I'm just going to explode that, because you could choose to make, a weld seam up here, and it would be kind of short, and then it would hit that branch. If I go back to maybe my view here, I could put a weld seam like right here. It'd be kind of short. And where I'm developing my pattern right now, it kind of puts a weld seam, or the end of my paper pattern, or whatever it is, in the bottom here. So sometimes when I'm building these out of metal, maybe I'm a little bit more aware of where I want my seams to be. And so if I was to put a seam here, I would kind of develop the cutouts like, they would just kind of be on the ends of my header pattern. I would have like kind of a half a cutout there, and have a half a cutout on the end. So if I go back to my drawing here, here I'd be putting half a cutout on this side. Anyway, right now you're just going to see me put it dead center of the pattern, with the seam kind of essentially 180 degrees away from the branch coming in. So my seam would be, this is actually a finished drawing. I have another one that's unfinished. This is the one we've been working on. But puts my seam kind of at the 6 o'clock position here in this right side view. So anyway, this is kind of the critical step. I like doing these, even though you might use the branch to lay out the header anyway. We talked about that in the first video. I think it's good to see where that information comes from to develop the header, though. So it can help you be more accurate in case you want to, if you're really critical on how the header weld seams were to the branch. Maybe I would do something like I'm doing here. But so that I've got a center line to work off of. I'm gonna use this as kind of my center line point. The information coming from this point here. So what I need is that distance over to that start of that branch cut out there. So I use, this is the line I'm looking for. And what I'll do is I'll pick up this distance. And so I just use, maybe I'll use just a reference line. So I'm going to use kind of a dashed line. But I want the information that tells me from this point comes across, and then it hits the header here, and then it hits the branch here. So that's the information I'm kind of looking for there. And that's the first bit of information that I kind of put on the center line of my pattern down below, and I'm going to copy it from the end of the pattern here. So this becomes that information, and I'm going to drop it there. And then the end of this line becomes kind of the start of that branch opening. So that's the first bit of information, and I would have it here because I've put my branch intersecting my header on center. That means that this little distance here picks up the same distance as over here from this branch to the end of the header here. If this branch was offset in the front view, I would have to account for how far that is offset. And there's a couple ways to do that, and we'll look at that when we do the forge round-to-round transitions. That I can either choose to pick up the distance off the end of the header to the branch, or I could even pick up the information from this side of the branch to that side of the branch, and so you'll see me on the next video kind of be aware of that, what information I'm looking for. Right now I know that it's symmetrical in the right side view, symmetrical in the front view, and front view and right side view. So I'm just knowing that I'm going to lay out these lines over here, that I'm going to probably just mirror them across, because I know that it's a symmetrical pattern in this 5-inch dimension ways. So cool. And I just used a white line there. That's just coming from this information here. Now here's the difference in this drawing, is that where the branch comes down and intersects the header, because the branch is a different diameter, we now pick up different dimensions, and I start to use like a different color of circle, and this is where you'll see me kind of use my dotted circle, just so I don't have so many dashed lines. But I want to pick up the distance, from here over to here. I'm going to use a circle to represent that distance. So now in the last drawing, each one of these, because these orientation lines essentially were the same spacing around the header as they are kind of around their development circle. So each one of these is the same distance around as it came down to here. Well, this is not the case here. This is the biggest difference in this drawing. Every one of these spaces is different here, because we're dealing with different diameters. So to me, this magenta colored circle is correlates with this line right here, the next line down. And so I like to pick up this distance here, and I can use a dot or a dash. Sometimes I use a dash there, but so I can see it. But this distance here relates to that that circle. I kind of like to keep those the same color. So and I just work these down. So now I need to pick up this next spacing, which is going to be different. And I'll just kind of prove my point here. If I were to copy, like in that last drawing, you could copy that circle and see that it was the same length. But if I were to copy this one, you can see it way overshoots this next point right here. So I'm not going to use that circle. I'm going to pick like a new color. I'm going to use a circle, and I'm going to use this as my center point and pick up this spacing here. And then I'm going to draw a line that relates to that in the front view. So this particular line right here, over to that orientation line. So that circle goes with that line length. And I just need one more. I've got this next one that's kind of a small. You can see this is a much smaller distance. So, and maybe here I'll just use like an orange circle, and that is going to reference this length. And then I'll pick it up with which is going to be kind of my longest length here. This really should be half the pattern when the branch intersects the header on center. So, yeah. And now I have all the information to develop this on the header. So I should kind of have to remember, that just helps me keep which line relates to which space here. And the first space that I determined was this white space, which really doesn't have a reference circle because it's just top dead center. It's at the 12 o'clock position here. So the next one I could then get the line information that relates to that circle. If it helps to do this in this way, or if you just want to snap all your circles and then pick up all your lines, whatever makes more sense to you. So that line relates to that circle, that line distance off the end of the header. And now I'm ready for my next group, which is going to be, I'm going to repeat my copy, only I'm going to grab this blue distance here. And this is just, because down below, it's this green circle in the right side view that I've got the stretch out for down below. And so this is the distance I'm looking for the next, from this orientation line over the next orientation line, which is why I have this blue circle. I'm going to drop it off of where I left off my pattern. There we go. Off the magenta circle. I'm going to do 2 of those because I'm working both sides of center line. And this pickup distance that relates to it off the end of the header. All right. And got one more circle to pick up, last little distance here. And I have to just copy it from the right center point, which is that one, and drop it on the end of the blue line here. And then pick up the last little bit of information here. Make sure I get the right spot. There we go. And that's kind of the end of the whole pattern for the branch in the header right there. So essentially I just kind of ghosted in what that whole pattern kind of looks like, half of it anyway. I'm just going to copy these around, but yeah, I can see that this is kind of long and tucks back into this length here and then back this way. And then it's just going to do the same thing over here. It's going to be symmetrical looking. But yeah, that's what that looks like when you lay that out flat. So what I like to do is just use maybe my mirror command. And I'm just looking for the line lengths here. So I'm going to pick all these up and select them. And then I kind of pick the center of my pattern so I can just kind of flip those around and then just drop them right there again. And then just make sure that it's a no. I'm not going to erase the source object, so keep them all. And then there, that's the round pattern that I'm looking for. And now I like to make these red with a solid line. I use my polyline command and draw these in, So maybe I'll start here with an arc and a second point. And there's a point here because they come together. I mean, that was 2 different lines. So look for those end points. And then I'm going to come all the way around here. This one here too has that point in the middle right there. All right, and then I've just got one last little space here. Back to my start here. All right, so that's it. That's the whole pattern for the branch to intercept. Yeah, not quite so football shaped. It's rounded off. Still oblong. It shouldn't be very round. If you see this being really round looking, usually you've picked up the wrong spacings here off the end of your header. So reference this video for that information. But that's a completed pattern. I could polyline edit, make sure all these are joined. I think I drew these as just line to line, but I could have drawn this as a rectangle too. And for me, I'd pull this out and pull that cutout out as being my header, like kind of plasma cutout. So that really concludes this drawing. That's a different diameter round around intersection. So, and that's our class assignment 5. After this, we'll go into class assignment 6, which is different diameters and pushed off center. So, stay tuned for that set of videos.